Hey folks, I hope you're doing really well. Today I'd like to talk about how you can use a pie chart to better understand the features in your game. Hopefully you have a list of features that you're going to be putting into your game. Let's say you're building an action role-playing game. That list would look like things like combat, skill tree, items, loot, narrative, procedural world generation, enemies, all that sort of thing. Now that list is really important because that tells you what it is you're going to be building. The problem with just having a list is it doesn't really give you a good understanding of how much effort you're going to be putting into one of those features over the other. It also isn't terribly helpful when it comes to, say, cutting or adding a feature, which is something you're probably going to want to do at one point or another. It just is. Anyone who's made games knows that is something that we all end up doing. So this is where a pie chart can come in actually really helpful. If you don't know, a pie chart is just a circle that represents 100% of what your game is going to have in it. That pie chart is then broken up into various slices, each slice being somewhat of a different size that represent a different amount of the pie, a different amount of 100%. So the one over on the right here, well, that's 50%. So what we do now that we have our pie is we can start putting our features into different slices. So if you're building an action role-playing game, my suggestion would be combat is probably where you're going to spend a lot of time and effort because that's where players are going to probably spend a lot of time in the combat. You want that to feel really good if you want your game to be fun. So let's put combat in the 50% section. That means that as a developer, you're going to be spending at least 50% of your time when you're working on the game, working on combat in some way, shape, or form. Now, combat's pretty broad, but you can sort of think of that as putting VFX in the game or animations or different, abilities, any way that you want to slice it. Next up, let's say we want to have really, really great loot because in an ARPG, loot is equally very important as well. So let's put loot over here in this section. Next, let's say we want the world to have really good procedural generation. So we're going to put that here. And then also we want really good enemies. We'll put this here because even though they are important, they're not as important as a really well-generated world. So it's okay if we spend less effort and time on the enemies than we do on the world itself. You can sort of see now how by breaking it up in this way, it's a really good way to visualize just how much time and effort you're going to be putting into different features in the game. A quarter of your time is going to go into loot. Half your time is going to go into combat. The rest of the time is going to be split between world and enemies. This is valuable, but there's another thing to use this for, which can also be really, really invaluable. And that's when it comes to adding features. Let's say we wanted to add PvP to our game. Well, this pie chart represents 100%. There's no room. You can't just add PvP over here and say, well, we'll get it done as well, because this represents how much time you have to make the game. It also represents all the features you're going to ship with the game. So instead of putting PvP over here, it has to go in the pie somewhere. So let's put it here because we think it's worth it, but that means that we're taking away from combat. Is that worth it? Is that actually something that we want to do? Do we want to cut into the time that we have to spend on combat in order to put PvP into the game? Maybe you decide that you do, maybe you decide that you don't. The goal here is that it creates the discussion and it acknowledges the reality that you can't just continually add stuff, because eventually what you're going to end up with is this kind of higgledy-piggledy mess full of all these different features that all are too small to really contribute to any meaningful gameplay, but they look good when you were coming up with them. But the reality is they don't actually make the game better. They just make the game more fragmented. Now, if you're an indie developer, 1 to 2 to 3 people, and you want to ship a game, say, in a year or two, and you want to keep your focus really small, you're trying to do it the right way, my suggestion is that your pie chart should look something like this. This is 100% of your game. This is the most important feature that you want to build. This is the second most, and this is the third most. Maybe you could have a 4 in here. I'd advise against having 4. I would prefer for you to stick just to the 1, 2, and 3. This is the most you should be focused on if you're a small team with limited time, or just the reality of like you don't have that much time to spend on these things anyway. Maybe you're doing it in your spare time. Maybe you're just on a constrained budget because you've managed to save up a bit of money and put it away so that you can focus on this for a while. But by sticking to a small number of features, it allows you to deliver the quality that you probably want, that players need in order to find your game fun. And it keeps you focused. One of the hardest things about game development is that technically you can add anything to your game, but you shouldn't. What this does by having this pie chart and by limiting yourself to 3, 4 at most features that you should be working on, it allows you to actually ship something. And end of the day, that's what we want to do. We want to actually release a game on Steam. We want to put something out there. We want to give players content to play and engage in. Look, I hope this is valuable. I hope this makes sense to everyone. If it doesn't, feel free to poke me in the comments below and I'll try and clarify it. If you have other ways of other tools that you've used that you want to share, please add them as well. For now though, thanks for watching. I'll see you again next time.